Today on BRStv Investigates, who makes the best heater? We have the answer. Hi, I'm Ryan, your host of BRStv Investigates, a weekly YouTube series which explores popular reefing theories, products, methods, what the manuals are missing, with a focus on putting them to the test. This week we put all of our most popular heaters to the test, not just for finite accuracy, but also operating variances, and then share our 3 favorites in a good, better, best format. Heaters have long been the bane of reefers' existence and the most common piece of equipment to not only fail on the reef tank, but also disappoint in terms of performance. We focused on the importance of redundancy in the previous episodes. This test focuses on accuracy. Accuracy is important because temperature plays a large role in controlling stability and the metabolism of the organisms in our reef tanks. Lower temps around 78 often result in more stable systems, and higher temps above 80 increasing the metabolism of the tank's inhabitants and very likely growth rates. Most reefers opting for the stable 78. There's no question you can have a pretty successful reef tank over a wide range of temperatures and even with fairly large degrees of daily variances. However, most of us selected a particular temp for a reason, and there's one thing I found universally true in this hobby, and it's effort put into stability of our ecosystems pays off in results every time. Overall attention to the stability of the parameters is very often the difference between the good to great tanks and the truly epic dream tanks. In relation to heaters, I think we first need to define what accuracy is and set some expectations. Accuracy could mean the exact point the thermostat is set to, meaning I set the heater to 78 degrees and the heater's internal thermostat is correctly calibrated to 78 degrees or close as possible. However, we need to consider the on-off cycles as well, meaning some heaters turn on and off within 1/10 of a degree from their set point, meaning if it was calibrated correctly, it would never go lower than 78 degrees or higher than 78.1, which is pretty impressive. Others have a 2-degree variance, meaning while the internal thermostat is correctly calibrated to 78 degrees, it's going to turn on at 77 degrees and off at 79, and there'll be a 2-degree swing every few hours. So even though those 2 heaters are both correctly calibrated at exactly 78 degrees, the one that only has a 1/10 of a degree variance is in the range of 20 times as accurate as the one that has a 2-degree variance. I think many of you are going to be fairly surprised by both the differences in the accuracy of the various heaters' thermostats, as well as the wide range of variances in the on-off cycles. Most of them have stated a plus or minus 1 to 2 degree accuracy, but none of them state if that's a set point or if that includes the on-off cycles as well. While we would all obviously like our heaters to be perfect, I think it's important to remember that the hobby-grade heaters we're testing today are mostly in the $30 to $40 range, and we should have appropriate expectations for that. It's not fair to expect them to contain technology or manufacturing standards found in $200 to $500 thermostats. That means if you tested 100 of the same model heater, it's pretty likely the production standards of the internal thermostats will result in up to a 1/2 degree or potentially larger variances, which is even more likely between different production runs. Testing 1,000 heaters is beyond the scope of what we can test today, but I would like you to keep reasonable expectations in mind when we review the thermostat accuracy. However, the one thing that we found to be pretty stable over the years is the accuracy window of the on-off cycles, meaning the type of technology that they're using or internal settings in a specific heater, which dictate if a heater only fluctuates a 1/10 of a degree or as much as 2 degrees is typically pretty stable. For that reason, I think the accuracy window of the on-off cycles will be the most important element of today's test. Keep in mind that if you find that your heater is off by even as much as 2 degrees, fixing that is typically as easy as setting it 2 degrees higher or lower, which is not ideal because you'd like it to be accurate out of the box, but the solution is simple. However, if your heater has an on-off accuracy window wider than you would like, there are limited options to fix that without buying an external controller, another reason why we're going to focus on that accuracy window. So we're going to test and share a total of 4 elements today. The thermostat accuracy, which will be the average of 1-minute measurements taken over a few hours. There are different ways to look at this, but I think the average is the best representation of how close the heater is set and calibrated to the selected temperature, which in this case is 78 degrees. We'll also test that on-off accuracy window to identify how big of an operating range the heater has, the actual watt draw versus stated, and how long each heater takes to increase the temperature 1 degree, in this case from 75 to 76 degrees. To test the temp, we used a $200 traceable NIST-validated 6426 thermometer, which is labeled to be accurate to 0.18 degrees and has an accurate operating range of -130 to 221 degrees and as accurate as you're going to get without truly breaking the bank. The 6426 also has a USB data logging feature, which records a reading up to every minute, which we'll use to report and display accuracy trends. We're going to test 8 different 300-watt heaters set to 78 degrees. Our #1 selling heater, the Jaeger 300 watt, Cobalt Neotherm and Accutherm, the JBJ True Temp, which has an external controller, the Finnex HMX, HMO, HPS, and the TH300 with a Reef Keeper as the external controller. I think the best way to approach this is to start with the lowest cost option and work our way up, because I think we'd all certainly expect the increasing performance to scale up with price. The Finnex 300 watt HPS is the lowest cost option we tested at $25 for a 300 watt heater. It has a fairly unique design which appears to be filled with some type of sand and an external temperature probe which could potentially perform better than internal probes. The average temp we recorded was 78.16, which is just 0.1 degrees off the 78 degrees we set it at, and what I would call pretty impressive. However, the HPS had an on-off accuracy window of 0.91 degrees with a low of 77.68 and a high of 78.6, which is almost a full degree swing once an hour, and at any given time could be off by just over a half a degree. Many reefers might be okay with a swing like that, especially at this price point, but there's some options out there that have a tighter window and also don't break the bank. The actual power consumption was 286 watts, and we recorded how long it took for the heaters to raise the temp 1 degree between 75 and 76, which took about 15 minutes. This was amongst the highest wattage and the fastest temperature increase. Up next is a $32 Jaeger 300 watt heater, which is the #1 selling heater we stock. This is another glass heater. However, the unique element on this heater is it doesn't contain any real electronics, just a bimetal thermostat which bends at different temperatures to open and close the thermostat's contacts. The EHEIM had an average temp of 80.64, which is off by 2.64 degrees and off by more than more people would like. However, the EHEIM kind of recognizes the inherent flaws of factory calibration on $30 heaters and has the ability to calibrate it, meaning once you identify the correct temp, you can turn the red dial and calibrate it to be accurate. However, the on-off accuracy window was only 0.55 degrees with a low of 80.38 and a high of 80.84, meaning it will be within a quarter degree of your desired temp once it's properly calibrated. The heater also tested at 269 watts and took about 17 minutes to heat the water 1 degree. Next up is the $36 Cobalt Accutherm. The accuracy of this heater was actually the furthest off at 80.77. There was also a fairly large on-off cycle swing between 79.93 and 81.66, or about 1.72 degrees. This was the least accurate heater we tested on both accuracy fronts. However, the Accutherm tested out at 288 watts, which is the closest to 300 we found, and only took 16 minutes to heat the tank 1 degree. Moving on to the $42 300 watt Phenix HMO titanium heater, which is our second bestseller, likely because it's affordable, digital, and most people appreciate the titanium heating element. The one element to note in this model is the thermostat is incorporated into the head of the heater. The Phenix HMO had an average temp of 76.48, which is about a half a degree lower than the 78 degree set point, and again, probably less accurate out of the box than most reefers would like. However, in some ways, it was significantly more accurate than other options because the on-off accuracy window was just 0.12 degrees with a low of 76.53 and a high of 76.65, meaning there's just over a tenth of a degree swing between the on-off cycles and what I would call ultra stable. So if you measure the temp and compensated, the HMO will likely be more accurate than the other options we've tested so far. The HMO tested out at 282 watts, but took 66 minutes to raise a degree, which is triple that of other options. I'm pretty sure this is because the thermostat is incorporated into the head of the heater, so what's on and actively heating, it can throw the accuracy off and cause it to shut off early. While this might seem like a big deal, it's only an issue for the first day or two while the tank is heating up. Once it gets to temp, it will perform at that ultra stable of 0.12 degree variances. The Finnex HMX is basically an upgraded version of the HMO, which includes a heater guard and a touch-sensitive control. However, it was significantly more accurate with an average temp of 77.6 and off by just 0.4 of a degree. The on-off accuracy window was 0.25 or a quarter of a degree as well, with a low of 77.72 and a high of 77.97 and a variance of just 0.12 in either direction. At just $6 more than the HMO, I think it's likely a decent option. That said, the HMX has one of the worst series of reviews on our site and only 2 stars, and we almost considered pulling it because of that. However, after reading some of the reviews, I think a lot of them are related to that issue of the thermostat being incorporated into the head of the heating element, which causes it to heat up much slower, and while it's heating up, to over-display the temp. However, once it reaches the desired temp, it will be pretty accurate. To that point and how this impacts the HMX, it consumed 286 watts, and we tracked the time it took for it to raise 1 degree at 3 different points. At 74 to 75, it was 21 minutes and similar to other models. However, we went beyond that and tracked it at higher levels as well. The closer we got to the set point, the longer it takes because the integrated thermostat is heating up and turning off prematurely. At 75 to 76 degrees, it took 30 minutes, and 77 to 78, it took 48 minutes, which is 3 times competitive heaters that have the thermostat located in other areas with less interference. We also tested other heaters in this regard, and only the titanium HMO and HMX with the integrated thermostat in the element had this issue. I do think it's important to be aware of this so you have proper expectations when you first turn the heater on. The net effect of this is that it only takes longer to heat the tank up initially. After that, there's some of the smallest on-off accuracy windows of all the heaters we tested. Because of the negative reviews, we wanted to go a bit deeper into the HMX with another set of data points, so I tested the 5 HMX heaters we have running on the Cato test tanks, which are all set to 78 degrees. And they came out at 78.35, 78.54, 78.6, 78.39, and 77.7, which are all almost right on top of each other and only off by just a half a degree and well within the stated accuracy range. I really do think most of the negative reviews are related to not understanding how this heater functions. Moving on to the JBJ True Temp, which has a considerable price jump to $130. This model differs from the rest of them because it comes with an external heater controller, which should increase reliability and accuracy. They also have models going all the way up to 1,000 watts, which is valuable to a lot of reefers. The tested accuracy range came out at exactly 78.02, which is just 2/100ths off, and by far the most accurate heater we tested, so to some degree, you get what you pay for. However, the on-off accuracy window was 2 degrees with a low of 77.03 and a high of 79.03, meaning every couple hours the tank rose and fell 2 degrees. That said, I'm fairly certain this is intentional, and a good time to point out that the volume of on-off cycles that achieve smaller accuracy windows also reduce the usable life of the heater and the control's electronics. So by increasing the on-off cycles to 1 degree, the heater may last longer. Another reason I think this might be intentional is because the on-off cycles are just 100ths of a degree off being just exactly 1 degree higher and 1 degree lower, which matches the accuracy almost exactly as well. With this degree of accuracy, that could almost certainly reduce that window if they wanted to. The True Temp ended up using 270 watts at the wall and taking 17 minutes to heat a single degree. Next up is the $140 300 watt Cobalt Neotherm. One note about this heater is it comes in a completely different form factor than other heaters, which is a hard shell case and flat, which means it's fairly indestructible and easy to install out of the way. You will notice it comes with 2 smaller heaters daisy chained together, and that's because a few years ago they had some issues with larger models breaking open. The 2 150 watt versions daisy chained together is their solution for larger heaters, and I think it works well. The average accuracy was 78.5 degrees and a half a degree off the desired 78 degrees, and not significantly different than some of the other options which come at a third of the price. However, the on-off accuracy window is a pretty stunning 0.05 degrees with a low of 78.47 and a high of 78.53. This means the temp is stable to just a couple 100ths of a degree at all times. There's no question, if you're in the market for the most stable and likely accurate heater out there, this is it. The Neotherm came out at 275 watts and took 17 minutes to raise a degree, which is about average. The last option we tested is a 300 watt Finnex titanium heater with an external controller. In theory, an external controller with a separate probe will always be more accurate. There used to be a plethora of heater controllers out there, but once the Reef Keeper light entered the market at $125, it basically made all of them obsolete, and while you'll probably never see an independent temp controller become largely popular again. The average temp that Reef Keeper maintained came out to 79.32, which is not significantly better than most of the other options we tested today. However, the on-off accuracy window was just 1/10 of a degree with a low of 79.32 and a high of 79.43. The Reef Keeper by default is set to keep the temp within 1/10 of a degree, so it is neat to see that it's working exactly as intended. There's one big differentiating factor with the Reef Keeper, which is all aquarium controllers are intended to be calibrated. I've seen both the Apex and Reef Keeper controllers off by more than a few degrees out of the box. So that note, we performed the calibration step on the Reef Keeper and it performed as expected with an average temp of 78.14, almost dead on with the reference temp, and a low of 78.09 and a high of 78.20. So after reviewing all this data, I think the good, better, best are pretty clear, starting with good, which is typically a low-cost option that works well. The Finnex HMO and HMXs are standouts here for me, and almost the same heater. Their accuracy windows were just dramatically tighter than the competition, and the HMX was the closest to 78 degrees out of the box. I would always check them against some reference, but it was pretty clear that they were standouts against other heaters in the same price range. Selecting the better heater was also easy as well because the Neotherm is easily the best heater we tested today. Both accurate out of the box, held the temp stable within a couple hundredths of a degree, and comes in a form factor many people will like. If you want the best heater out there and the resulting stable temperature for your tank, this is almost certainly it, but it does come at a cost. The best option out there is what I'm going to call the hybrid of today's findings, with the Reef Keeper coupled with the EHEIM heaters. First, a separate controller with an external probe is always preferable. You can easily calibrate the Reef Keeper to identify the exact accuracy you're looking for, and of course the redundancy found in using the Reef Keeper to control the temp and setting the EHEIM internal thermostat to a couple degrees higher as a backup. The Reef Keeper is also capable of setting off audible and visual alarms so you know if something's wrong, which none of the other heaters do, or at least as well. That's not to mention the wealth of other items the Reef Keeper can control with additional accessories and back up your tank based on time, pH, ORP, salinity, float switches, humidity, and a variety of other options. So why the EHEIM and not other heaters? I personally like the redundancy found in using dissimilar thermostat technologies, the Reef Keeper's internal electronic thermostat and the EHEIM's bimetal thermostat, which has no electronics, just metal contacts that come apart or closed based on temp. In most cases, the heater is going to be turned on and off hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, which is hundreds of thousands to millions of times a year. Powering up and down like that is not good for any type of electronics. By setting the EHEIM higher than the Reef Keeper, it keeps the EHEIM's thermostat contacts closed and powers the heater, so the power cycles have a much more limited impact on the usable lifespan of this type of heater than an electronic heater. If the Reef Keeper ever fails, the EHEIM's thermostat will work as a backup. This is my current favorite solution for heating a tank and very similar to what we're running on the BRS 160. I will note on the 160 we're using a more advanced Apex controller. I didn't include that in today's test because the price kind of prohibits it from being sold as a standalone temperature or heater controller, whereas a $125 Reef Keeper is almost a no-brainer for anyone who wants to add redundancy, accuracy, and controllability to the tank for a pretty low entry cost point. For those of you wondering how to calibrate your heater or controller, you basically have two options. The first one is you can get a highly accurate thermometer like one of the traceable options that we sell on our site and I trust, or you can get three lower cost options, a couple of you might already have around the house, and average them, which should produce reliable results. So what are your thoughts on all this and your favorite heater? I can't wait to read what the larger community thinks about accuracy in general, as well as your favorite heater in our Reef to Reef thread pinned down below. The Reef to Reef community has really had some awesome vantage points on all of our other topics in the last few weeks. As always, if you value what we're doing here, do us a huge favor and give us a quick thumbs up and subscribe, because we release new BRStv Investigates every week. See you next week with another episode of BRStv.